Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Burger Time, brought to you by Diet Coke. It's the programmer fuel, and as you could tell, I have enough laughs to show. I hope. So today's topic, of course, is Bard's Tale, a game that I worked on back in the early '80s, and then eventually went to work on basically taking over the entire franchise when we went to Bard's Tale 3. But effectively, let's just go right on into it. Bard's Tale was originally created as a game called Spectre Snare. It was the brainchild of Michael Cranford, and he wanted to do an RPG because at the time everybody was playing Wizardry, myself included. And I wanted to do an RPG after I was doing all these graphic text adventures. I wanted to do something different. And so the talk was going on, and the opportunity came in, and Cranford showed up. And now, just so you know, Michael Cranford and Brian Fargo were childhood buddies. They were like on the same track team over at Corona Del Mar High School. So there's a little bit of just favoritism there, but nevertheless, Cranford brought in what appeared to be a solid prototype of a game, again, called Spectre Snare. Because at the end of the game, the idea was for you to get this magical item called a Spectre Snare, which is supposed to be like the equivalent of a Wonder Woman lasso that if you capture a creature with it, you kill it or basically take over. So the idea was get this magical item, the Spectre Snare, find the bad guy, in this it was Mangar, and then you kill him. However, though, as time went on, we then found that we really couldn't afford to do the whole game because while Cranford was doing the original game logic, he couldn't do all the art and so forth. So Interplay was funding an artist. In this case, it was Todd Camasta to do all of the monster art and stuff like that in the game. And some prototype art was done by Cranford himself. But then later on, Todd Camasta was doing all the art. Now, Todd was using my art tools, thing that I designed for the original Mind Shadow, Tracer Sanction, Burgertime to do animations. And I came up with the system that allowed you to do up to 4 animations at the same time. And that's what was incorporated into Bard's Tale. And then, of course, I did sound drivers and other stuff like that. But the biggest problem was that Cranford was not a team player at all. He had a desk at Interplay, but he was never an employee. He was never really even affiliated with Interplay. He was just coming in kind of as a contractor doing the game using Interplay resources, but the mentality was that Interplay was going to help him get this game marketed and sold. And of course, early on, there was a deal struck between Cranford and Brian Fargo about doing, how Cranford was going to get paid. But unfortunately, near the end of the project, Cranford's ego kind of got in his way, and he then went ahead and held the disc hostage, the final disc of the game, and he made Fargo change the terms of the contract, which unfortunately was disappointing. But things like he got credit, he got to do the sequel. He had total rights to do the sequel on his own. But, of course, he only did the Apple II version. I'm trying to remember if he did the Commodore version, but I'm not really sure because I have all the archives and stuff like that, but I see all my code in there, so I'm trying to remember. But I went ahead and took over a lot of the ports. And I was doing stuff like there was an Atari 800 port that was started, but it didn't even get past prototype stage because we realized at the time the Atari 800 was just not a market we were going to go into. I mean, I did a game called Racing Destruction Set for the Atari 800, and one of the intents was supposed to get some royalties on it, and we got nothing because the game just didn't sell very well at all. I mean, we got paid for the initial port, but that was about it. But back to Bard's Tale was, after doing Bard's Tale, I was already doing stuff on the Apple II GS, where I was doing Bard's Tale 3. Sorry, I take it back. I was doing Task Times in Tone Town for the 2GS, and I really fell in love with the computer. I said, look, I want to do these games right. And I went ahead and took Bard's Tale 1 And then eventually when Bard's Tale 2 was complete, using all my graphic routines and tools and stuff like that, I took both of those games and I poured them to the 2GS. And here's a copy of Bard's Tale for the 2GS, still in shrink wrap. I actually got a whole bunch of these when we pressed these discs back in 86, 87? I'm trying to remember. Look at the copyright here. Well, 86, 87, whatever, it says right there. Enhanced for the 2GS. Oops, right there. And went ahead and redid all the music, redid all the sounds. A lot of Cranford's code. When I saw the code, I'm like, holy shit, how does this thing work? So I rewrote a lot of it. There's still some traces of the code in there in this version, but it was like, there was a lot of stuff I had to fix and re-engineer because it was only written for a specific memory map on the Apple II and it had no portability whatsoever. So I went ahead and got this running on the 2GS, totally rewrote a lot of the engine, and of course the graphics and stuff are all my drivers, font manager, my own, all the level stuff's mine. But after Bard's Tale 2 was done, oh yes, and here was Destiny Night, Bard's Tale 2 Destiny Night. This is a PC version, but I did the 2GS version. I also worked a bit on the PC and Amiga versions and things like that. I helped in all the versions pretty much. But after Bard's Tale 2 was completed, Interplay and Cranford kind of parted ways. Cranford mostly because he went off to, of all things, he, what was it? He went ahead and got a theology degree of all things. But then again, when you look at Bard's Tale 2 with all the biblical references in there, it was kind of, it made sense. I mean, I didn't know that he had this desire for spiritualism, but hey, to each his own. More power to him. But what happens now is that after Bard's Tale 2 was done, Brian was convinced by Alan Pavlich that we should do a a futuristic game like an Ultima style. And that game eventually became Wasteland. So Fargo was doing all his focus on that game, and he was even really not that thrilled about continuing with Bard's Tale, mostly because of the fact he didn't want to deal with Cranford anymore, and the only person technically who knew the game was Cranford. And I had to remind Brian, no, I know this engine inside and out. I know this game. I mean, I pretty much wrote half the goddamn thing. So I want to take it over. So he gave me a nothing budget, minuscule team, and we went ahead and started working on Bard's Tale 3. And Bard's Tale 3, we wanted to go back to the roots of Bard's Tale 1, because Bard's Tale 2 really had very little connection, if anything, of Bard's Tale 1, because Bard's Tale 1 was all set in the city of Scarabray. Granted, that name was not even used with Scottish lore whatsoever. It was just a cute name. There's absolutely no Scottish lore whatsoever in this game, other than Scarabray is freaking cold, and it's supposed to be set by the city is encased by the spell of eternal winter. But that was really more of an excuse because at the time when Bard's Tale 1 was written, we didn't have the ability to do an outdoor, so you can't leave the city. So we just made the excuse that you can't leave the city because it's covered with a snowbank. There was even a time which they thought we would have an outdoors and you'd be able to ride horses. So even in the map, in the game package, there was a stables. So we created the stables, put the map, hoping to do the code to do the outside, but whatever reason, Cranford couldn't get the data into the game. And when I tried to help, he kind of refused it. So we ended up having to kill any and all ideas of doing the outside. And while we had the stables still there and in the drawing, we then just made this text saying, oh, you entered the stables. Oh, the monsters have eaten all the horses. Sorry. But Bard's Tale 2 did have an external map that you were able to go from city to city. And then, which was, it was done okay. But then again, the game required another disc, and it was just the balance wasn't there because Cranford wrote the game by himself in the case of the game logic, and didn't really balance it at all. I mean, that's one reason why the game was called out in the reviews. Well, then came Bard's Tale 3, which is this one. In fact, I'm going to show you up on my wall. Let's show the picture there. That is this up on the wall right there, as hung there. That was actually given to me as a present from one of the executives at EA as a job well done, because the game sold so well. This game was written technically by 4 people. I did all the coding and all the scripting, every line of it. Mike Stackpole did the storyline, which is where we go back to Scarabray. We used a lesser god, Tarjan, that you actually release in Bard's Tale 1 as the villain. And then we set the city on fire, and I wanted to have all these dimensions and so forth because I wanted to expand gameplay. But then we had Kurt Hayden doing all the music for me, and then we had Todd Camaster doing the art. So we have Todd Camaster for art, Kurt Hayden for music, Mike Stackpole for overall story, and I did everything else. And that's it. 4 people. Where at the same time, we had at least 10 people working on Wasteland. So it was, tiny team versus a giant team. But we went ahead and, labor of love, and I love this game. This is essentially, I pretty much own this, this franchise is really close to my heart. After doing Bard's Tale 3, one of the things I did with this game that hadn't been done before was that when I wrote all the numbers, typed in all the numbers for all the monsters, I actually wrote a combat simulator. And what it did is I ran it on Apple II, and I just let it run for a couple of days. And what it did is it took, let's say, a level 6 party, and it just randomly generated encounters and did the equivalent of attack, 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 defend, 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 and using the same game logic as Bard's Tale, it gave me the probability of what the chances of the creatures would kill you. And with that, I look at the reports and adjusted some numbers, ran the simulation again, adjusted some numbers, ran the simulation again, until finally I said, okay, these maps, the monsters on these maps are for level 3 and up parties. These maps are for level 7 parties. This map is for these higher levels, which is one of the reasons why the game was so well balanced. People were just saying, hey, we're starting around the first level, it's like pretty easy. But then when you get to the next levels, then all of a sudden it starts getting harder, but then the story keeps you in here, so by the time you actually build up to be strong enough to get to the next level, you then are actually strong enough to get to the next level. And I don't throw monsters at you that are just simply, oh, I just randomly hit you with some demon lords. Have a nice day as you all die. So it's one of the reasons why the game was so well balanced. Granted, it didn't get everything. I mean, there were some parts of the game where people said it was too easy, other places it was too hard. But you can't please everybody. But at least I made the effort to try to make this game as balanced as possible. Bruce Schlickburn was one of the testers, and he was like my go-to guy, in which he took care of all the little things, and he came up with the numbers, and he helped adjust things in play balance. He and his wife, their eyes fell out with how much they played this game. And I still, in fact, for the remake I'm doing right now, I'm actually working with him to help me rebalance and do little minor tweaks for the game. So then we move forward in time. But actually, during the time we were doing Bard's Tale, I'm going to show you a little paraphernalia. I got some things here. This is a puzzle. It's in here. Hear the sound? This is a puzzle that was given away for, at I believe, an CES. Can't remember if it was CES or E3. I think it was CES at the time. But this was a giveaway to some of the stores to help promote the original Bard's Tale. So saying, hey, if you buy a couple of cases of this, we'll give you a free puzzle. And so I have this as one of my souvenirs. I have a lot of other things. And other things I'm going to show you, because now we're going to go a little bit more down the history of Bard's Tale before I get to the current things. Here is one of the actual prototypes of the manual Bard's Tale. This is printed with our laser printer we had back at Interplay. I had this proofreading copy because I had to go through it to make sure that it wasn't screwed up. Because I know, Cranford had copies of these too. But I've spent a lot of time with people making sure, okay, this is correct, that's correct, this is whatever. Which of course shows because I did it again with Bard's Tale for the 2GS. But then, of course, after doing Bard's Tale 3, naturally, I wanted to do Bard's Tale 4. Well, unbeknownst to me, well, actually, at the time, but it was known to me, is that Interplay was already now about 4 years old, and we were tired of just doing work for hire. So, I mean, yes, it pays the bills, and it's somewhat steady income, but it really isn't a way for Interplay to grow as a company. By the way, that's Janelle Jakeways who just walked by me. So one of the plans for Interplay is eventually be its own publisher. So the money we got for Bard's Tale 3 and Wasteland was enough money, because we weren't really sharing that in much at all, because Wasteland, we kept all the money. There was some money, if I believe, went to Cranford for Bard's 3. I don't know if it was a buyout or royalty, but not my problem. But the problem is that we were doing 2 games on our own nickel. Those games were Neuromancer and Battle Chess. And I was working on mostly Neuromancer, but I also did a lot of stuff on Battle Chess. But Neuromancer, I did the Apple II version of it. The idea was for us to write these games, ship them out, release them on our own distribution, and be our own publisher. The problem is that EA, Electronic Arts, the company we were publishing Bard's Tale with, wanted to be our distributor. But then so did Activision, and Activision offered us a better deal, so we ended up signing with we ended up signing up with Activision. Well, Electronic Arts wasn't thrilled about that, and they actually got a little pissy with us and decided that they were not going to let us use the intellectual properties for Wasteland and Bard's Tale ever again. At least not without some terms that made, like, what's the point? Because after I got off of Bard's Tale 3, I went straight to work on Neuromancer, and after I finished Neuromancer, I had all these ideas of what I wanted to do with Bard's Tale 4. And then I said, all right, let's do Bard's Tale 4. So started the plan. We got Paul O'Connor to come work on it, and he called it War of the Dragons. And we then put together a basic storyline, and I started working on the engine, and which was, by the way, based on the engine I did for Bard's Tale 3. But the problem is that I was then notified when we were working on this game that we could not use the name Bard's Tale, which I'm saying, well, if I can't use Bard's Tale, then what are we going to call it? Well, we have War of the Dragons, but then I brought up, well, while Paul O'Connor called it War of the Dragons, there's no freaking dragons in this game. You know, it's you're supposed to be going against this name Namtar, so I'm like, whatever. But here it is, we're wrapping up the game, and it was going to be called Bard's Tale 4. Guys, it was like the Warrior's Tale was the temporary word for it, but it was like, you know, the Warrior's Tale. But we were told can't use it. So, you know, Brian told me, okay, call Dragon Wars. And I'm like, but there's no dragons in this game. So I had to go back and work on the game for a couple of months and the storyline and the plots and stuff like that to put dragons in it. Even though what's hilarious was that we had already commissioned this piece of art from Boris Vallejo to be this big demon, which is essentially a manifestation of Namtar's true form, with a barbarian male and female, and which plays into the game itself, but has absolutely no connection to the word Dragon Wars. But whatever. So we ended up shipping the game Dragon Wars, and I went ahead and did all the ports. I did the C64, the Apple II version, even the PC version, and I still even have all the source code. It still builds, even right now, all the versions. But Bard's Tale 3 and Dragon Wars had certain things that were new in RPGs, which is funny, because like when Bard's Tale 1 was in development, I was telling Cranford, look, girl, we need to have women players in this game. The game was essentially all the characters were male, all the bad guys were male, and only like a few token female, like sorceresses and witches. But that's it. It was a male-centric game. And Cranford told me flat out, women don't play these games. And I'm like, what? Excuse me? And he flat out did not want women. You could not play as a female character or put female characters in your party. And this went from Bard's Tale 1 and Bard's Tale 2. Well, as soon as I got the green light for Bard's Tale 3, and in fact what's even hilarious is that there's actually variables for female characters in Bard's Tale 1 and 2 for the 2GS. They're just not used. But I actually had it already there. So it's like sex, male, female, other. And with Bard's Tale 3, I actually had to have the artist draw me sets of, okay, I have a warrior, I need a male and a female. I need a wizard, I need a male and a female. And, in some cases I just recycled the male art from the previous games, but I had every single character class. I needed a female version. And I had to come up with some new compression algorithms because I was being told, well, if this is going to not fit on the disk, then we're going to have to pull that out. So I made certain it stayed in. I'm reading some of the posts right now. Intoxicatious is writing, I love that I could choose male or female on Dragon Wars. You're welcome. One of the things that's interesting was that when I was doing Bard's Tale 3 and Dragon Wars is that the text printing system I had to create for both of those games had to have the ability to do tense as well as gender. So like I would have a combat going, Thunder Pants raises his hammer and hits the witch, causing 15 points of damage to her. I had to have male, female, and gender-neutral pronouns for everything. Because like a good example is a stone golem. If I hit a stone golem, it says, you hit the stone golem and cause it 15 points of damage. So those are little subtleties that were all in the engine that I had to solve all these problems. In which plural, English is just such a wonderful language to deal with plurals. But dealing with him, her, it, his, her, its, all those different things. I had this strange parsing language, which I just told it, okay, name hits the gender pronoun. I had all that stuff generated, which is interesting because that's where my experience came from doing Mind Shadow and Tracer Sanction. Those games are graphic text adventures in which all it was about was processing English and processing text. And that came in handy when I was doing the work for Bard's Tale, in fact, the Bard's Tale trilogy. The main thing I had to deal with was just gender, English composition, sentence structure. But another thing also I had to put in there was text compression. There's like a novel's worth of text in those games. Especially Bard's Tale 1 and 2, not so much. But Bard's 3 and Dragon Wars especially, there was boatloads of text. One of the things I had to deal with when bringing back the source code is that a lot of the text in the game is compressed. And I had the tools, I had to reconstruct all my tools that will be able to not only decompress the text, but recompress it. So as I change text and add things and fix some spelling errors, I went ahead in there and fixed it all. But it's still compressed and still works the old way, because sometimes the old ways do work best. Now, after doing Bard's Tale, after doing Dragon Wars, we sold a good number of copies, but it wasn't anywhere near the number of copies we're selling for Battle Chess. And at the same time, Fargo had this thing about a game called Stonekeep that he wanted to do. which was his idea of where to take the Bard's Tale trilogy, or in this case, the quadrilogy now, even though Dragon Wars, so it would have been called Dragon Wars 2. But he wanted the cinematic CD thing, and he was working with a guy named Peter Oliphant, who had done a game called Lexicross for us. And Brian wanted me to focus on doing quick ports because I was doing all these ports of things. I was churning out games like crazy. I mean, I was easily doing 4 to 6 games a year, which is like a game every 2 months. I mean, that's how fast I was churning out titles. But the Retropone, you're saying Bard's Tale 3 Dimension Travel is awesome. Wait till you see Dragons of the Rip. Oh my God, you're gonna love it. And yeah, with Stonekeep, that is an UGG. I mean, after for one, Stonekeep was interesting because that game, they had as many as 75 artists on it at Interplay at one time working on it, and it took them 5 years to do it. Whereas I've never spent more than a year working on any single title in my career. Never. I mean, I just churn out games. Well, I went ahead and tried to convince to do Dragon Wars 2, but I was turned down, and I was then told to start doing things like Track Meet for Game Boy, doing the optimizations on Descent. I did Out of This World for the Super Nintendo and then the 2GS. I went ahead and did, I mean, a slew of game ports for Interplay, but it was really a matter of we needed money, and me spending a couple of months doing a port was the fastest way for me to generate money for the company. So I was doing that, churning out, despite the fact that while I wanted to do a Dragon Wars 2, or Bard's Tale 5 technically, it just wasn't really working out because of my scheduling, and they were splitting all their money on Stonekeep. And the problem with Stonekeep is that they thought, honestly, they believed in their schedules and everything, that the game was going to ship this Christmas in 1990, and it was going to ship this Christmas in 1991. It was going to ship this Christmas in 1992. It became a running joke. Heck, there was a Interplay Christmas video that they did in 1995 where they were making a parody of, what was that, Pulp Fiction. And they were doing the thing about the Royale with cheese. And one of the jokes was, so what do they call Stonekeep in France? And the guy replies, late. And so a project's in trouble when it's being the butt of a joke at a Christmas video and it still hasn't shipped yet. They eventually did ship, but let's put it this way: there's no Stonekeep 2. I think that should I'll just drop the mic right there. Well, irony. During these years, after I was no longer working on the Bard's Tale series, and we were trying to do a pseudo sequel called Meantime, which didn't really go anywhere. Come to find out that EA was working on Bard's Tale 4. They hired forgot who was it they hired for Bard's Tale 4?
I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Steve Englehart.
Steve Englehart was working at EA, and his job was to make Bard's Tale 4. Well, that took some time, but then after a while, they brought in Janelle Jakeways, who had come off of working with Interplay, of all people, on the Lord of the Rings game for the PC. And they had her with another old school alumni, Susan Manley, working on bits and pieces of a game that they were doing called Bard's Tale 4. And the game was all set in, what was it, set in Scarabray or something like that, or somewhere else?
It's a generic kingdom.
Yeah, some generic kingdom and so forth. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and show you some stuff. Ready? Here's my desktop. This is the stuff for Bard's Tale 4 that was never released, never finished at Electronic Arts. Let's see here. This is some of the creatures. They had characters and monsters and things. They were all done in 2D. So the overland was a side motion. They only had, in fact, the game was interesting because it had 3 different modes in it. It had a first-person mode, much like in Bart's Tale, but they also had a overland mode in which you were in 2D. See, like here's a gargoyle. Here's a goblin. And these are all the different walk cycles, and these are pieces of art that were done for the never ever released at Electronic Arts Bart's Tale 4. And in fact, I'm going to play you a lullaby. This is music that they were hoping to play for Bart's Tale. Now that was a music test that was done for Bart's Tale 4 from, from Bart's Tale 4 for EA. But let me go ahead and get rid of this. But as you can see, the game was being written at a time when we still had EGA art, because this game was being developed in 1988 through when did they shoot it on? 1992?
No, it's about
91?
91. 1991.
Yeah.
91.
Yeah. So somewhere around they started around 1988, and they stopped the project in 1991. And of course, that meant Janelle Jaquays was no longer employed. People that were working on the game just were all reassigned or let go. So this is interesting because at the time, a few years later, I had left Interplay and went to co-found a company called Logicware. And I wanted to do a new Bart's Tale game. And we actually threw together a first-person type view and took it to EA and pitched it at them. But what we didn't know was that they were already having a bias against the franchise, mostly because of the fact that they had already spent millions of dollars on their failed attempt at doing a Bart's Tale game, and they really just didn't care for the franchise anymore. They thought it ran its course. So we then promptly abandoned the idea and moved forward. One of the other things that we've got here, this is the design doc of one of them, of Bart's Tale 4. This has all the stories, the game design, so it's like, now one of the things that they did in this game, which in many ways I'm actually glad they didn't finish this title, was that this game went against the grain of what Bart's Tale was. Bart's Tale, like Wizardry, or even Might and Magic, was a game where you create a party of adventurers and then you have them go around the world and adventure. This game that they were doing in Electronic Arts was one where you had a pre-rolled characters, a pre-rolled party, and at this party you could not change. You had to play the game as these characters and run through essentially an entire scripted video or scripted game. So much like most modern games today, where you take on the roles of, let's say, Lara Croft, and you are doing the adventures of Lara Croft, in this game, the Bart's Tale 4, you were supposed to take this party of adventurers, already set, you have males, females, elves, whatever, and go through a completely canned story. And to me, that goes completely against the entire nature of what Bart's Tale is. Very much like that 2004 Bart's Tale that was done by In Exile, where you have a pre-made character and you run the entire game with this one character. That is not Bart's Tale, which is one reason why it's like, well, I was actually asked many years ago, saying, what do I think about the new Bart's Tale game that's being worked on? And we're like, that's not Bart's Tale. It's Bart. You have the name Bart's Tale. I mean, I don't even know how you got the name, but the 2004 game is not Bart's Tale, not at all. Bard's Tale is a game where you have a party of adventurers and you're just exploring the land and, killing things for fun and profit, mostly for fun or profit, or you're trying to save everybody or whatever. But let me go shut something down right here. For some reason, somebody is not getting the idea that I don't want to be disturbed. But anyways, I went ahead and, I've always wanted to do another RPG. And I have always been wanting to do one in the same Bard's Tale stuff. And I had created a story and a world and stuff like that, in which originally would have been called just dragons, and just all these dragons. In fact, I nicknamed the game The Rip. And in recent times, now that it seems that people are interested in RPGs, we're going to be doing a Kickstarter in which we're going to be doing, with Janelle Jakeways, myself, Susan Manley. Who else can we talk about? Who said we can give their names out?
I think
Ken.
St. Andre.
Ken St. Andre is going to be working with us on it. How about Frank? I think he's...
No, I was having commitments.
Okay. But we have a couple other people there who are, big into the TSR type Dungeons and Dragons worlds, but we're going to be doing a full-on RPG with different scenarios written by some very well-known TSR and Dungeons and Dragons scenario writers, based in a world that I created. Based in a world I created with a whole overlong storyline and stuff using a game very much that looks kind of like the way the full screen Bard's Tale would do. Granted, it is updated to modern technology, so it is a full screen game. We're still doing prototypes of how the game looks, but we've got lots of concept art. We'll be showing it off in our Kickstarter. But one thing that was interesting took me by surprise, was that there was an announcement to do Bard's Tale 4. And In Exile was doing it. And of course, I promptly pledged onto the game. But at the same time, I saw a lot of people were saying, hey, is Becky involved? And of course, I'm like, that's odd. This is kind of like my franchise. Why was I not called? But we then eventually got a hold of each other. And I then brought up the fact that, hey, I still have all my stuff for Bard's Tale. Let's show it to you. Let me go to another folder. And Bard's Tale. Whoop. And let me go to the desktop. Here is as I load it up, data, full screen art. This is the actual art for Bard's Tale for the Apple IIgs, with the infamous picture of me getting my head removed. There's the background picture of the Bard. And here's all the animated, here's all the art for the main screen for the game. And this is what I'm going to be using for the new PC version. The PC version will be using all this new Apple IIgs art, so it will look so much better than what it did. And same goes for Bard's Tale 2. And if you look at this folder, let me go back to here. Let's see. Here's a folder that's called Bard's Tale 3. And here's the source code to Bard's Tale 3, where the Apple II version. Here's the Apple IIgs version that was never released. Here's the PC version that was done. Here's the music that was done by Kurt Hayden for me. And this is all done back in 1987, 88. It was pretty heartbreaking in the sense that the game, I couldn't get the budget to do the art. So right now I had to rely on the fact that some of the art was supplied to me by Electronic Arts. I mean, I'm going to have to redo that. But other pieces of art, like here's the victory art for the game. It'll have to be recolored. But what I did is that, like here, yeah. Oh, it must already have it running. But what I did is I took all the code and converted it all into C. In fact, as you can see, I did it a while ago. But here is all the code written based completely on my Apple IIgs source code, in which we'll build Bard's Tale. Now, right now, at this precise moment in time, the game is not actually running, so I'll have to go ahead and fix that. There we go, move this over. I go to send it back to the web feed. Close up all these other windows of stuff like that. Yeah, someone says, yay, see. Yeah, Bard's Tale 1, Cyberpope writes, I play Bard's Tale 1 about every 5 years or so for some reason. I need a macro for AAA DDD after next port. Well, I don't know if you're aware, but the Apple IIgs versions, as well as Dragon Wars, had keyboard macros. On the Apple II, what you had to do was you had to hit, I believe it was Open Apple and then one of the number keys, 1 through 9. And it was a function key. You hit Open Apple 1, then you type in your keyboard, and then you hit Open Apple 1 again. And then from now on, every time you pressed 1, it played those keys. So I went ahead and set 10 keyboard macros. One of them was attack, 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 defend, defend, defend. So that when I got into a combat, I just hit one key, does the combat for me. It makes grinding so much easier. Other things I did is like at Bard's Tale, the trilogy, is that I had auto mapping inside of it. The music changes the instruments so that if the bard's playing a song and you're armed with, let's say, the snare drums or the fire drums, or like the fire horn, I will play with the trumpet. If you're doing the snare drums, it will play your song with a snare drum. I mean, those are some of the reasons why I couldn't use the equivalent of MP3s for the original trilogy, was that I had to do everything in MIDI because I created the music on the fly. Unreleased 2GS artwork. No, not right now. I'm going to be saving that for when we actually get the game out. Someone was asking me if I could see some unreleased 2GS artwork. Not quite ready for prime time. The thing is that I'm here just to talk about the history of the game, but I will be doing a future episode once we release the Bard's Tale trilogy for In Exile. And just to remind you, is that the Bard's Tale trilogy that I'm working on is that I took the original source code for the Apple IIgs versions 1, 2, and 3. I selected the best art from all versions of Bard's Tale, and I'm using that in this version of the game. Now, it's granted it's still 320 by 200. I'm using shaders to scale it up and smooth out the art, because unfortunately I'm not being paid enough. I'm barely paid at all to do this. I'm doing mostly for a labor of love to get this up natively running on the PC so that you'll be able to save your games in native files, be able to import your characters between game versions and so forth. I'm still looking into how to pull in art or pull in your characters from the 2GS emulated versions, because unfortunately it was kind of hidden away and it's a little tough to even get access to that data. So I'm not making a promise that I'm going to be able to import your characters from the other games. I'm going to try. But the thing goes is that the trilogy will be available on Mac and PC. I'm going to eventually release it on Linux, but it's not like going to be on the initial release. And who knows, I might be able to put it on other platforms, only because since it is being built on my cross-platform library, there really is no reason why I couldn't get it on other platforms. It's just a matter of I need to deal with licensing issues and so forth for that. But if you want a copy of it, go over to In Exile right now, go to the Bard's Tale 4 website, pledge, so at least you are on the list to be able to get a digital copy. I believe the bar was $20. 20 or 25. I don't know what the minimum pledge is these days, and besides, it may change, because who knows when you're watching this video. Maybe it's like 5 years from now, and then in that case you get it at a Steam sale. But the bottom line is that if you get a copy of Bard's Tale 4 or pre-order it, pre-purchase or pledge, then when my versions are done, you will get your code. you'll get your version. Someone writes, Shogun William Kaw, what a name, says, you should do voice act for Fallout lore with Shoddycast as part of the Storyteller series. Can you repeat that using words in English? Someone wrote, post the Bard's Tale in Exile Kickstarter PayPal. Yeah, so if you haven't already pledged to go ahead and get onto the Bard's Tale 4 Kickstarter, that's how you can get in on it. Now, just to, again, let everybody know is that I'm currently not involved in Bard's Tale 4, the one that's being done by In Exile. But then again, I'm kind of busy doing my own RPG, so it's one where, like, yeah, we'll see what they come up with, and when they get it, when they're ready to show it. Let's see, we're running low on time, so at this point, I'm going to open the floor to questions. So, can anybody on the Twitch TV channel here send me any questions? I'm going to be looking up here, scrolling up all the text because I was mostly free-forming until now. And someone says, Summer B76 writes, I backed the Kickstarter for Bard's Tale 4 in large part because of the new versions of 1 through 3. I never played Bard's Tale before and I'm looking forward to it. Can't really afford much, but I felt I had to back it anyways. Well, Summer, thank you very much. I would recommend that you at least mention it on the forums as well as the comment sections on the Kickstarter, that the reason you backed it was because of, my contributions. Next one, someone writes, Shogun Cow William Kaw writes, on Wiki he is bought out. I would probably assume you're referring to Mike Cranford and him being bought out from Bard's Tale. I wouldn't be surprised. That's a particular piece of information I don't have any first-hand knowledge of. All I do know is that his involvement ceased at the end of Bard's Tale 2, and then I took over the project, and it was been my franchise ever. It was my franchise. Another one writes, Bard's Tale 4 forever. I'm here. Okay. I'm here. Bard's 4 forever. Great. Someone's saying Intoxicacious is saying they're playing Bard's Dragon Wars right now. Someone's laughing at my reference to Thunderpants. Let's see, another one. Linoleum CP is asking me, is Bard's 3 still stuck with EGA art? The answer is some. Some of the art that's going to be used in Bard's Tale 3, unfortunately, I had to pull it from the EGA version. I do have a copy of the Amiga version. I'm pulling some of the art from that. However, though, it's one of those where the PC version had crappy colors. The Amiga version were very colorful, but the animation stank. So I'm like, which one sucks less? And the cases where I could just use the 2GS version, like, okay, generic Barbarian number 12, I'll just use the Barbarian art from the 2GS version of Bard's Tale 1 and 2, and I'll use that picture. But for monsters or things that I cannot replicate, like Wasteland Warriors and the robots, yes, there are Wasteland Warriors and robots in Bard's 3. I'm going to have to pick which one, either the Amiga version or the PC version, which I've already got. I've got them referenced here, and I've got them all cataloged and archived and so forth. I've just had to make final selections. It's one of those things where I really have to figure out that after the game's out, if I can get people to help me redraw some of these pictures and so forth, or send some money to me via PayPal so I can send money to my wife so she could draw them. She'd be happy to draw them. At least one nice thing is that the Bard's Tale Trilogy Remastered, while the game original source art's only 8-bit, the game's actually running in true color. So any new art that I'm given, I don't really have a restriction on color. So I can do whatever I want with it. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more and see. Someone writes, it's like Diablo or Torchlight style, not what I'm looking for. Hard to find good call. Oh, I think someone's referring to... Intoxications is referring to the Bard's Tale 2004 game, where it's Diablo or Torchlight style. Yeah, it was done in that 3/4 perspective mode, but that was their interpretation of doing the game. So if you like that kind of game, I would recommend you can pick it up on a Steam Summer Sale. Or pick it up, but I think you can get it for free if you buy one of In Exile's other games. I'm talking about the Bard's Tale 2004 iteration. Let's see, I'm scrolling down some more. Someone writes, you'll find a way, Becky. You always do. Trust me. I always do, and most of the time it's because I have no other choice. You wouldn't believe the number of times I've had to figure a technical solution out of a marking problem. Let's see. Someone writes, Storyteller series is a machina on the lore of the wastelands. Okay, cool. Yeah, if anybody wants me for voiceover art, I'm available. Just send me a cheeseburger. I'll work for cheeseburgers. Yeah, she'll work for cheeseburgers too. Actually, for her, she works for steaks. She tends to go more for steaks and potatoes. Give her steaks and potatoes. Give me sushi or cheeseburgers. We're yours. Next, Cyberpope writes, "One day your Kickstarter, you can be sure you're taking my money. Please take my. Please give us the money because I need to eat, and I really, really want to make this game." Next, how much A&D mechanics were hijacked for Bard's Tale 1? Thaco sticks out like in a punch bowl. Well, let's put it this way. The mechanics of Bard's Tale 1, as far as the mathematics and the balancing stuff, was ripped off from Wizardry. All right, we just ripped them off. We just saw what Wizardry was doing, and guess where Wizardry ripped theirs off from? Armor Class 10. I wonder what pen and paper system has an Armor Class 10 to -10. I wonder. Yeah, we'll rip each other off. Come on. Let's just make a great game. Not worry about little minutiae like that. Cyberpope writes, C64 graphics were what I used to. Then I saw the Amiga version back in the day and I crapped my pants. Yep, well, basically the Amiga version and the 2GS version came from the same source. 8-Bit Weapon writes, Bard's Tale 3 was the best Bard's Tale of all. Best written, best high-quality graphics and animation. Well, yeah, I hope so. And by the way, just in case you didn't know, 8-Bit Weapon is working with us on our game Dragons of the Rip. In fact, he's already submitted us some little pieces of music. But we actually have some cinematic music being done by Kurt Hayden. And we have 8-Bit music and other pieces of music done by 8-Bit Weapon. And let's see here. Louis Per Year writes, unfortunately never played. Does the Bard only use music for their focus? I'm playing 5th edition Bard using stand-up comedy as their bardic use. Okay. Well, one thing I can tell you about with Dragons of the Rip. Dragons of the Rip is a classless game. It's just like Dragon Wars in the sense that your characters are all based on skills. You will have sets of skills. You then assign points to the skills, and then that's how you differentiate each character based on your skills. Another thing the game was going to do is it's also going to assign who is your leader and who is your sidekick and so forth based on how you play the game. Like if you always have the first player as the leader, your person's always fighting, that would technically be your leader, but whenever you interact with people, you can always have your wizard in the back always interacting, and that's technically your leader. What will happen is that there will be parts of the game in which it will be interacting in the equivalent of a can animation or something like that, in which what it will do is the game will say, leader of the party will speak this line. Then the monster will speak a line. Then you're speaking a line, and so forth. But it's going to be your party. This whole game is about you creating your characters, male, female, whatever race, with assign their skills, and then you just, by your play, will determine this guy's your bard, this girl is your warrior, this man is your plunky sidekick, this woman is your party leader, etc. And you go through the game playing it that way. Now, of course, if you give your character the ability to play instruments, you do need to get skills for certain instruments. Like you got to, just because you learn to play the drums doesn't mean you're going to play really well on the piano or the guitar. So you're going to have to learn your string skills, your drum skills, your horn skills, if you want to be a full-on musician. But of course, you could just simply find this horn of plenty or whatever it is, and say, don't know how to play it. I better start learning. Next, someone writes. Okay, I'm going back here. Okay, I used to play Bard's Tale 1 and Dragon Wars in CGA when I was a kid. Games only came in magenta and cyan. Apple TGS versions look great. Well, I don't know if you're aware, the Dragon Wars for the PC actually ran in 16 colors. You just had to run the installer again, or hold Shift when you ran the game, and it forces the menu selection again to choose the colors. But yeah, I had a EGA mode and a CGA mode. Good old glorious 4 colors. But it actually translated the colors for you. Next one, yeah, someone writes Retropone. Can't wait. My first character will be named Thunderpants. Only a mother would love that character. Be my guest. Played the original Bard's Tale on Apple II and C64. Avoided PC versions that were not made by Interplay. Actually, no. The PC Amiga versions were not made by Interplay. They were made by Electronic Arts, which explains why the art was really substandard, because had I had a hand in that art, I would have rejected it. Because, as you saw, Bard's Tale 3 for the Apple II and the Commodore 64, despite the limitations, was really advanced art. Also, heck, Bard's Tale 3 for the Apple II had 2-voice sound, something that hadn't been done before, at least not in an RPG. Next, death snares were atrocious from Cyberpunk. Yeah, I hated them. That's why I didn't put them in Bard's 3. Death snares was something in Bard's Tale 2, because Cranford had this thing about if the party died, the DM won. No, Dungeon Masters aren't supposed to win or lose. It's supposed to make everyone have fun. Someone writes, I'm God! Mwahahaha! Bard's Tale 4. Well, in Bard's Tale, or any of my games, if you want to play as a god, fine, play as a god. Granted, combats are kind of a waste of time, but that's why you want to play it. Cranford crapped the bed on that. I call shenanigans to increase the sales of cheat books. I'm assuming you're referring to the difficulty of Bard's Tale 2. I don't really believe that there was any shenanigans about trying to sell cheat books, but there was shenanigans in the sense that Cranford really did believe that if the game killed the party, he won. Which is like, that's not how you're making these games for the players, not for yourself. Next, 8-Bit Weapon. Becky, please tell people why Bard's Tale 2 was so hard. Mine's philosophy on D&D, Dungeon Master rules, blah, blah, blah. I think I had already answered that question. Or Mike's philosophy. In old computer, makes sense. Okay, Shogun William Caw writes, the horn of cheeseburgers, joke instrument. Well, there's going to be my warped sense of humor in the game. In Dragons of the Rip. Trust me on this. While the game is going to be serious and, epic tale, epic story, there's going to be places where there's going to be some bad jokes and strange scenarios and things where you're going to giggle and go like, ugh. But other times you're going like, oh, epic battle, pull out sword and run into it and kill things. Lucas Herrier writes, I agree with your assertion that the Dungeon Master wins if the players enjoy the time. And I do agree with that. In fact, that's been my design philosophy. It's that you, the players, all of you out there who's watching this video right now who buy my games, my view of how you play my games is you put down your hard-earned money to get a copy of this game. It is not my place to tell you how to play it. If you want to play it the way I presented it, do so. Roll up some characters, go in there, don't do any cheats, just play. If you want to start off the game by importing your characters and then resetting their stats, so at least you could still have your characters, but at least start the game, do so. But if you want to start off with your level 75 characters, well, granted, the game's going to be exceedingly easy as far as combat's concerned, but you're still going to have to quest. And I'd say, if that's what you want to do it. Do it. If you want to go in there with a sector editor and find the hit points of your characters and set them to 99, 99, 99, 99, you know what? Fine. Do it. I'm not going to put in any CRCs. I'm not going to put any checksums. I'm not going to put in any sort of tests. If you want to go in there and make your characters godlike beings, fine. Go ahead and walk all over the characters. You're only, you're not playing the game as I intended it to, but you know what? If that's the way you like to play the game, you want to play the game with characters with the Horn of Plenty that's been modified to spread 99 hit dice of 99 times with 99 rounds. fine. I'll try to make sure that the engine doesn't crap on it, but it'll run. But it's back to play the game that you want to play. Play it how you want to play. If you want to play the game as a bunch of lunatics that are going around bending the laws of reality, fine. If you want to play as a bunch of honor-seeking paladins, please do so. The game will, the story and the characters will modify themselves to work with your playstyle. So therefore, if you play as paladins, you will be hailed as conquering heroes as the game progresses, because people are going to say, oh, this is the people who saved the kingdom. Whereas the other ones are like, oh yeah, it's those guys. The ones who, didn't they pie the king? Yeah, they're those guys. Just hide your valuables, okay? 8-Bit Weapon writes, when do we get the new Bard's Tale trilogy for the Bard's Tale Floor Pledge? I'm hoping to have a alpha version within a few weeks. I've just been busy right now just writing all the low-level code and getting all the engines and all the art pulled out, which is I'm completed with that. I mean, I have the art, I have the sounds, I have all the stuff pulled out of the games, and I'm now in the middle, as I've just shown earlier in this cast, I have the code converted to C already. I'm just going through debugging it right now, because I play the game, and of course, it teleports me into random places and stuff, and I'm like, uh-oh, I gotta fix that. But it's progressing, and it's actually going to be very, very soon. I still need to work out within Exile how we're distributing it, so I don't know whether we're going to be releasing it on Steam or Good Old Games, or whether it's going to be on the old school Steam account or the In Exile account. This is something that In Exile and Old School is going to figure out very soon, but don't worry, we're going to get it in your hands. By hook or by crook, it will be in your hands. Next, RetroPone writes, Bard's Tale Editor C64. Everyone in my party had Spectre Snares and Frost Horns. Just saw that Cyber Herb. Well, you know what? I totally expect that within hours, if not days, after we release the new Bard's Tale trilogy, that I will see people making sector editor or character save game editors and stuff like that that'll let you modify the characters. And well done, well done, well done. Have fun. Now, it will be using my Burgerlib build system to build things, and I don't know if many of you have been noticing, but I have been open sourcing a lot of that stuff, and that's going to be the topic of my next conversation. And I am running out of time, so what I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to wrap up here is, please click on subscribe. Please click on follow me on Twitter and Twitch TV, which is Burger Becky. Please follow Old School, OLDESKUUL, because that is our official news for stuff coming out from Old School. If you want to see my source code, go to GitHub and go to subscribe to Burger Becky. Also, I have projects up on Old School, OLDESKUUL. I will be putting up tools and stuff like that, so that once the Bard's Tale trilogy is released, I will be releasing a lot of the tools that I use to generate this code. And hopefully I may be able to do something in the future where I may even open source some of these things. So we're working on this stuff. I am a firm believer of sharing my code. I just wish that all of you would return the favor and making sure that you back my Kickstarter, or in my case, I can't use the word my, it's our Kickstarter. Because Susan Manley, myself, Maureen Starkey, Caspian Prieb, Kurt Hayden, Seth and Michelle Sternberger, and Janelle Jakeways, as well as many others who I just forgot their names right at this precise moment, and those who I can't say quite yet. We need to, pay our rent so we can be able to give you Dragons of the Rip. Just so you know, next week I'm going to be talking about Out of This World, because someone slipped me a burger. So I will be talking about the development of Out of This World for the Super Nintendo and the 2GS. And then 2 weeks from now, I will probably be talking about, what was the other topic someone brought up? Oh, well, I'll figure it out. But anyways, next week is Out of This World. So I'm going to be showing you the stuff for Out of This World, showing you a little bit code samples, and things like that. Oh, that's right. 2 weeks from now, I'll be talking about the Burgerlib build system. So that'll be quite technical. But next week, we're talking about Out of This World. So anyone, Dark Clyde 666, please follow Old School on Kickstarter. Please follow Old School on Twitter. We're going to be posting news and stuff. We're right now in the middle of making a website for Dragons of the Rip. We'll be showing off concept art and showing off some things for the game. We hope to have the Kickstarter soon. And we're just right now just wrapping up loose ends on what we're trying to accomplish here. Because we are, dedicated that when we do our Kickstarter and we ask for a specific amount of money, we're going to deliver a game with that specific amount of money. We are not planning at all on using your funds to use this to get a publishing deal or get some sort of wacky thing going on. No, you're doing it to give us the money so we can go ahead and do the game. We're going to put it up on Steam and GOG. You're all going to get keys because you help us make this game, and we're not going to work with a publisher or anything like that. We are the publisher. So that, at least it's coming from me. And my wife is here. She's going to go ahead and slap me upside the head if I ever say anything I shouldn't. But,
Over right now.
oh. But anyways, thank you very much, everybody, for coming by for this Bard's Tale talk. And of course, you can always go to my ask.fm account to ask me anything. And I will be here until next week. So again, next week, Out of This World. Take ta-ta.